The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clanged against the concrete floor of my garage, echoing like a gunshot in the midnight silence. I was underneath my beat-up Ford pickup, wrestling with a stubborn oil pan, when I heard voices drifting through the thin walls from our kitchen. Sharp, angry voices that made my stomach clench. "Mom, just stop lying to me." That was Lana, my 19-year-old daughter, home from college for the weekend. "Everyone at school knows about you and Brett. It's embarrassing." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I froze under the truck, oil dripping onto my forehead. Brett Hollin. The name I'd been hearing way too often lately from my wife Nora's lips. Always casual mentions. "Brett says this protein powder is amazing," or "Brett thinks I should try that new yoga class." Brett, the personal trainer at the fancy fitness club downtown. Brett, with his perfect abs and his stupid man bun and his Instagram account full of shirtless selfies. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nora's voice came back, but it had that defensive edge I knew too well. 23 years of marriage teaches you to read every vocal inflection like a roadmap. "Really? Because Jenny Morrison saw you two at that coffee place on 5th Street last Tuesday. Holding hands, Mom. Holding freaking hands." Tuesday. Nora had told me she was working late, doing inventory at the dental office where she worked as a hygienist. Dr. Patterson's office supposedly had a massive backlog of supply orders to process. "Jenny Morrison needs to mind her own business," Nora snapped. "And so do you. I'm your daughter. This is my business when you're destroying our family." I heard footsteps stomping across the kitchen floor, then the slam of the back door. A few seconds later, Lana's car roared to life in the driveway and tires squealed as she peeled out onto Maple Street. I lay there under the truck for another 10 minutes, staring at the rusted undercarriage and trying to process what I'd just heard. Nora and Brett. My wife of 23 years and some muscle-bound pretty boy half her age. Well, not half. Brett was probably pushing 40, but he looked like he was 25 and acted like he was 15. When I finally crawled out from under the Ford, my knees creaked like old floorboards. 45 years old and already falling apart, while my wife was apparently running around with a guy who could bench press a Buick. I wiped the oil off my hands with a greasy rag and headed inside. Nora was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her work scrubs, scrolling through her phone with that intense focus she usually reserved for online shopping. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "How's the truck coming along?" she asked, her voice artificially bright. "Oh, you know, same old problems." I grabbed a beer from the fridge and popped it open. Heard Lana storm out. "Everything okay?" Nora's fingers tightened around her phone. "Just teenage drama. She's upset about some boy at school." I took a long swig of beer and studied my wife's face. She'd always been pretty, not stunning, but pretty in that girl-next-door way that had caught my attention at a company picnic back in 1999. Brown hair that she kept in a neat bob, green eyes that used to light up when she laughed at my jokes, a smile that could make me forget about whatever crappy day I'd had at the logistics company where I worked. But looking at her now, I realized I hadn't seen that real smile in months, maybe longer. When was the last time she'd laughed at one of my jokes? When was the last time we'd had a conversation that lasted more than 5 minutes and wasn't about bills or household maintenance? "So," I said, keeping my voice casual, "how was work today? Get that inventory finished?" Another flicker across her face. "Oh, that. Yeah, we got through most of it. Dr. Patterson wants us to finish up tomorrow." "Tomorrow's Saturday." "I know, but you know how he is about staying on schedule." I nodded and took another drink. Dr. Patterson was actually pretty laid back about schedules, from what Nora had told me over the years, but I didn't point that out. "Well, I'm beat," I said. Think I'll grab a shower and hit the sack. Okay, I'll be up in a few minutes. But when I came out of the bathroom 20 minutes later, Nora was still downstairs, and I could hear her talking quietly on the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but her tone was soft and intimate in a way that made my chest tight. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the murmur of her voice drifting up through the floorboards. Outside, a train whistle echoed across Milltown, one of the freight lines that still ran through our fading industrial city, carrying goods to places that probably had more hope than we did. Milltown used to be something. Back in the 50s and 60s, the steel mill and the railroad made this place boom. Good jobs, decent houses, kids playing in streets that felt safe. Now half the downtown was boarded up, the mill was a rusted skeleton, and most of the young people left for bigger cities as soon as they graduated high school. But Nora and I had stayed. We'd bought this little 2-bedroom house on Maple Street back in 2001, planning to upgrade to something bigger when we had more kids. That never happened. Lana was our only one, after 3 miscarriages that we never talked about anymore. So we stayed in the starter house, and it gradually filled up with 20 years' worth of accumulated stuff and accumulated silence. Nora finally came upstairs around 1 in the morning. She slipped into bed quietly, probably thinking I was asleep. I lay there listening to her breathing, wondering if she was thinking about Brett Hollin and his perfect abs and his stupid motivational Instagram posts about crushing your fitness goals. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Saturday morning, usually Nora's day to sleep in, but apparently she had places to be. I pulled on jeans and a t-shirt and headed downstairs. She was already dressed, wearing her good jeans and a sweater I'd bought her for Christmas. Her hair was done, and she was wearing more makeup than she usually bothered with for weekend errands. "Morning," she said without looking up from her phone. "I'm heading out for a bit. Marla wants to go shopping." Marla Jourdain was the office manager at Dr. Patterson's practice, a sharp-faced woman in her early 40s who'd always struck me as the type who collected other people's secrets like some women collected shoes. She and Nora had gotten close over the past year, always going out for drinks or shopping trips or mysterious girls' nights that seemed to happen more and more often. "Shopping for what?" I asked. "Just stuff. You know how it is." I poured myself coffee and watched her gather up her purse and keys. "What time will you be back?" "Not sure. Depends on what we find." She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, the kind of automatic gesture married couples do without thinking, and headed for the door. I followed her out to the driveway and watched her climb into her Honda Civic. "Hey, Nora?" She looked back at me through the open car window. "Tell Brett I said hi." Her face went white, then flushed red. For a moment she just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Then she put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway without another word. I stood there in my driveway, coffee mug in hand, watching my wife drive away to meet her lover. The October morning was crisp and clear, the kind of day that should have felt full of possibilities. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into a very long fall. Monday morning at Riverside Logistics was the usual circus of missed deliveries, angry customers, and drivers who thought GPS was a government conspiracy. I'd been working there for 12 years, coordinating shipments and trying to make sense of supply chains that seemed designed by people who'd never actually shipped anything in their lives. My desk was in the back corner of the main office, which gave me a good view of the warehouse floor and the parking lot. It also meant I could see Tommy Brennan's pickup truck when he pulled in around 10:30, which was unusual because Tommy usually worked the evening shift. Tommy had been my best friend since high school. We'd played football together, double-dated to prom, been each other's best man. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at the community college, and we usually grabbed beers at Mickey's Tavern every Friday night to complain about our jobs and our wives and the general decline of everything. But Tommy looked uncomfortable when he walked over to my desk, like a man carrying bad news. "Hey, Ethan, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. "Look, I probably shouldn't show you this, but, well, you'd want to know, right?" He handed me the phone. The photo showed Nora and Brett sitting at a corner table in Rosie's Cafe, one of those trendy coffee places that had opened downtown in a doomed attempt to bring some life back to Main Street. They were leaning close together, Nora's hand covering Brett's on the table, both of them laughing at something. The timestamp showed Tuesday afternoon, right around the time Nora was supposedly doing inventory. "My cousin Linda works there," Tommy said quietly. "She took the picture and sent it to me this morning. Thought you should know." I stared at the photo for a long time, studying every detail. Nora's face looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. Brett was wearing one of those tight-fitting athletic shirts that showed off his gym-sculpted physique. They looked like a couple. They looked like people who were sleeping together. "Thanks," I said finally, handing the phone back. "You okay, man?" "Yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was furious and hurt and humiliated, and underneath all of that was a cold, calculating anger that surprised me. I'd always thought of myself as a pretty easygoing guy. Live and let live, turn the other cheek, all that stuff. But sitting there looking at photographic evidence of my wife's betrayal, I felt something darker stirring. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions at work while my mind raced. By 5 o'clock, I had a plan. That evening I told Nora I was going to Mickey's to watch the game with Tommy. Instead, I drove to Big Mike's boxing gym on the south side of town. Big Mike Kowalski was a 60-something former Golden Gloves champion who ran the grittiest, most honest place in Milltown. I'd been going there twice a week for the past 5 years, ever since my doctor told me I needed to get in shape or risk a heart attack by 50. The gym was in an old warehouse building that smelled like sweat and leather and decades of hard work. Heavy bags hung from the ceiling like punching bag stalactites, and the ring in the center was surrounded by folding chairs where old-timers sat and offered commentary on the younger fighters' technique. Big Mike was behind the front desk when I walked in, reading a boxing magazine and eating what looked like his third sandwich of the evening. "Ethan, you're early tonight. Usually don't see you till Thursday." "Yeah, well, needed to hit something." Mike looked up from his magazine and studied my face with the kind of attention that came from 40 years of reading people's moods. "Everything okay at home?" "Not really." I wrapped my hands and went to work on the heavy bag, throwing combinations until my shoulders burned and sweat dripped onto the concrete floor. Mike watched from across the gym, occasionally calling out corrections to my form, but mostly just letting me work out whatever demons I was carrying. After an hour, I was exhausted and oddly calm. I unwrapped my hands and walked over to where Mike was cleaning up equipment. "Feel better?" he asked. "Some." "Want to talk about it?" I told him about Nora and Brett, about the photo and the lies and the growing certainty that my marriage was over. Mike listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally like a priest hearing confession. "So what are you gonna do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know yet." "Well, let me tell you something I learned in the ring," Mike said, hanging up a pair of gloves. "When somebody sucker punches you, you got 2 choices. You can go down and stay down, or you can get back up and make them regret it. I'm not going to beat up my wife, Mike. I'm not talking about beating anybody up. I'm talking about fighting smart. You want to hurt somebody who's hurt you? You don't go for the body. That heals up quick. You go for what they're really proud of, their reputation, their ego, their sense of who they think they are." I thought about that on the drive home. Nora had always cared deeply about what other people thought of her. She volunteered at church functions, served on the PTA when Lana was younger, made sure our lawn was always perfectly manicured, and our house always looked respectable from the street. Her image meant everything to her, Brett was even worse. His whole identity was built around being the hot young trainer that all the soccer moms drooled over. He posted constantly on social media about his workouts and his diet and his philosophy of living your best life. He was exactly the kind of guy who would be devastated by public humiliation. When I got home, Nora was already in bed, allegedly asleep. I sat in the living room with a beer and my laptop and started doing research. Brett's social media presence was extensive and nauseating. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, even LinkedIn, all filled with shirtless selfies and motivational quotes and videos of him demonstrating exercises with captions like, "Crushing Monday like a beast." He had maybe 3,000 followers, mostly middle-aged women and young guys who wanted to look like him. His Facebook page listed him as single, which was interesting. Either he was playing the field to keep his options open, or he was keeping the relationship with Nora quiet to avoid drama with her husband. Smart move, but it also gave me information I could use. I spent 2 hours going through his posts, his tagged photos, his check-ins at various locations around town. The guy documented his entire life online, which was incredibly stupid from a security standpoint, but very helpful for someone planning revenge. Nora's social media was more restrained. She mostly posted pictures of food and inspirational quotes about friendship and family. But scrolling back through the past few months, I could see subtle changes. More photos of herself, more attention to her appearance, more posts about living life to the fullest and following your heart. The really interesting stuff was in her tagged photos. Marla Jourdain had posted several pictures from their recent girls' nights out, and in the background of one, I could clearly see Brett sitting at the bar. Another photo showed Nora and Marla at some kind of fitness event, and Brett was right there in the frame wearing a staff shirt from his gym. So Marla knew about the affair. She was probably facilitating it, providing cover stories and alibis. That was useful information too. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, Nora was sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about her exciting new romance. In a few hours, she'd wake up and go through her morning routine, making coffee and checking her phone and getting ready for another day of lying to my face. But things were going to change. I was done being the clueless husband, the last to know, the object of pity and whispered gossip. If Nora wanted to blow up our marriage for some muscle-bound pretty boy, that was her choice. But she was going to pay for it. They both were. The next few weeks fell into a strange rhythm. Nora would leave for work in the morning, and I'd head to my job at the logistics company. We'd make polite conversation about bills and household maintenance and Lana's college classes, like actors playing the roles of a married couple. But underneath the surface, I was watching and planning and gathering evidence. I started paying closer attention to Nora's schedule. Her late nights at work happened every Tuesday and Thursday. Her shopping trips with Marla were always on Saturday afternoons and lasted exactly 3 hours. She'd started going to a yoga class on Sunday mornings at a studio that, according to their website, employed Brett as a guest instructor twice a month. I also started noticing things around the house. New lingerie in the laundry that I'd never seen her wear. A different perfume that was definitely not the vanilla scent she'd worn for years. Text messages that made her smile in a way that twisted my gut into knots. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in early November. I was supposed to be at the gym, but I'd finished my workout early and decided to drive past the dental office to see if Nora's car was really there for this alleged late-night inventory session. The office parking lot was empty, except for Dr. Patterson's BMW, which he always left there because he lived within walking distance. No sign of Nora's Honda anywhere. I drove around town for an hour, checking the places I thought she might be. The fitness club was closed. Rosie's Cafe was dark. Finally, on a hunch, I drove past the Sleepy Inn, a rundown motel on the outskirts of town that rented rooms by the hour to truckers and people having affairs. Nora's car was in the parking lot, right next to Brett's ridiculous yellow Camaro. I sat in my truck across the street, engine running, staring at those two cars and feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just an emotional affair or a midlife crisis flirtation. This was the real thing. My wife was in a cheap motel room with another man, probably doing things we hadn't done in months. I could have stormed into the motel office, demanded to know which room they were in, kicked down the door and confronted them, but that would have been stupid and probably illegal, and it wouldn't have accomplished anything except giving them a dramatic story to tell their friends about Nora's crazy husband. Instead, I drove to the hardware store and bought a small tube of superglue and a pack of razor blades. Then I went back to the motel and got to work on Brett's car. I squeezed superglue into the door locks and key slots. I used a razor blade to carve cheater into the paint on the driver's side door. Then I took the mouthguard from my gym bag, the one I used for sparring, and wedged it under the windshield wiper with a note that said, "You're gonna need this when her husband finds out." The whole operation took maybe 5 minutes. I was back in my truck and driving away before they ever knew I'd been there. The next morning, Nora came down to breakfast looking tired but oddly satisfied. She was humming while she made coffee, and she'd put on makeup even though it was Friday, and she usually saved that effort for the weekend. "How was your evening?" I asked, not looking up from my newspaper. "Fine. Just work stuff. You know how Dr. Patterson gets when we fall behind on paperwork." "Mm-hmm. And how's your friend Brett doing these days?" She froze with the coffee pot halfway to her mug. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing specific. Just wondering if he's still posting those motivational workout videos. Guy's really dedicated to his craft." I wouldn't know. I don't really follow his social media." "That's weird because you liked 3 of his posts yesterday. I saw the notifications on your phone when you left it on the kitchen counter." Her face went through several color changes, white to red to pale green. "Ethan, I think we need to talk." "Do we? About what?" "About us. About where we are." I folded my newspaper and looked at her directly for the first time in weeks. "Where we are is sitting in our kitchen on a Friday morning, having the same conversation we've had every Friday morning for the past 5 years. Where you are, apparently, is somewhere else entirely." She opened her mouth to say something, but her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her expression changed to something like panic. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. "We'll talk about this tonight." But we didn't talk that night because Nora came home 3 hours late with a story about helping Marla deal with some crisis at her apartment. And we didn't talk the next morning because I was gone before she woke up. I spent Saturday at Big Mike's gym, working out harder than I had in years. Mike watched me pound the heavy bag for 2 hours straight, then finally called me over. "Whatever you did, it's working," he said. "What do you mean?" "You're fighting angry, but you're fighting smart. That's the difference between a brawler and a boxer." "I'm not fighting anybody, Mike." "Sure you are. You just haven't stepped into the ring yet." That afternoon, I drove to Mickey's Tavern to watch college football and drink beer and pretend everything was normal. Mickey's was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and the conversation was usually about sports or work or whose kids were getting into trouble. But today, the conversation was about me. I walked in around 2 o'clock, and the place went quiet for just a moment. That awkward silence that happens when people have been talking about you, and suddenly you show up. Tommy was at the bar with his cousin Linda, the one who worked at Rosie's Cafe. Next to them were Dave Martinez from the auto parts store and his wife Kelly, who taught at the high school. "Hey, Ethan," Tommy said, but his voice had a weird quality to it. "How's it going?" "Can't complain. You guys watching the game?" "Yeah, but it's a blowout. Michigan's eliminating everybody." I ordered a beer and tried to settle into the normal rhythm of Saturday afternoon bar conversation, but something was off. People kept glancing at me and then looking away. Conversations stopped when I got close enough to hear them. Finally, Kelly Martinez leaned over and said, "Ethan, honey, are you doing okay? I mean, with everything that's going on?" Everything that's going on with what? She exchanged a look with her husband. Well, people are talking about Nora and that trainer guy, and about what happened to his car yesterday. My stomach dropped. What about his car? Somebody vandalized it pretty bad, Dave said. Carved up the paint, messed with the locks. He's been posting about it all over social media, talking about how some jealous husband is harassing him. I took a long drink of beer and tried to keep my expression neutral. That's terrible. Any idea who did it? Come on, Ethan, Linda said quietly. We're not stupid, and honestly, good for you. Guy had it coming. I don't know what you're talking about. Look, Tommy said, we're your friends. We're on your side. But you need to be careful. Brett's been talking to people, saying you're stalking him and Nora. He's talking about getting a restraining order. The beer turned bitter in my mouth. A restraining order? For what? He's saying you've been following them, threatening him, vandalizing his property. He's got photos of his car and everything. I felt the walls closing in. Brett was smarter than I'd given him credit for. He was getting ahead of the story, painting himself as the victim and me as the unhinged husband who couldn't accept reality. Has anyone actually seen me do any of these things? I asked. Well, no, Kelly admitted, but people are talking, and you know how this town is. I knew exactly how this town was. Milltown thrived on gossip and drama, especially when it involved people bringing each other down. The story of the cheating wife and the crazy husband would spread through every bar and coffee shop and church basement within days, but two could play that game. I finished my beer and stood up. Thanks for the heads up, guys. I appreciate you looking out for me. Where are you going? Tommy asked. Home. Got some things to take care of. I drove home and spent the evening on my laptop, creating fake social media accounts and gathering ammunition. If Brett wanted to play the victim, I'd give him something to really cry about. The war escalated over the next 2 weeks. Brett kept posting on social media about the harassment he was experiencing, complete with photos of his vandalized car and vague references to unstable individuals who can't accept reality. He was building a narrative where he was the innocent victim of a jealous husband's rage. But I was building a narrative too. I started with subtle moves, anonymous tips to the Better Business Bureau about Brett's gym using unlicensed trainers, a few fake reviews on Yelp mentioning that he was unprofessional with female clients. Nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. Then I got bolder. I created a fake Instagram account and started following all of Brett's regular clients, mostly bored housewives and young guys trying to get ripped. I'd comment on their workout posts with helpful suggestions like, make sure your trainer is actually certified, and be careful about trainers who get too personal with clients. The beauty of social media warfare is that you can destroy someone's reputation without ever lying. I never said Brett was sleeping with a married woman. I just asked questions and made observations and let people draw their own conclusions. Meanwhile, things at home were getting worse. Nora had stopped even pretending to work late. She'd just announced that she was going out and leave without explanation. When she came home, she'd go straight to bed without talking to me. Lana came home for Thanksgiving break and immediately noticed the tension. What's going on with you two? She asked me, while Nora was upstairs getting ready for another mysterious evening out. What do you mean? Come on, Dad. You barely talk to each other. Mom's acting weird, and you look like somebody eliminated your dog. I considered telling her the truth. Lana was 19, old enough to understand that marriages sometimes fall apart, but she was also Nora's daughter, and I didn't want to put her in the middle of whatever was coming. We're just going through a rough patch, I said. It happens. Is it about Brett? I looked up sharply. What do you know about Brett? I know Mom's been hanging out with him, and I know people at school are talking about it. Jenny Morrison's mom saw them together at that new restaurant downtown. They looked pretty cozy. So the gossip network had already spread to the college crowd. That was actually helpful. The more people who knew about the affair, the harder it would be for Nora and Brett to control the narrative. "Your mom's going through some kind of midlife crisis," I said carefully. "She'll probably snap out of it." But I didn't believe that anymore. This wasn't a phase or a temporary rebellion. Nora had checked out of our marriage completely. She was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. That moment came the first week of December. I was at my desk at work when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and devastating. "Check your email. You need to see this. A friend." I opened my personal email and found a message with no text, just a video file attachment. I downloaded it and hit play. The video was clearly shot through a window, probably with a phone camera. The quality was grainy, but the subjects were unmistakable. Nora and Brett were in what looked like a hotel room, and they definitely weren't discussing workout routines. I watched about 30 seconds before I had to stop. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely close the laptop. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing and trying to process what I'd just seen. Someone had been watching them. Someone had recorded them. Someone had sent me the evidence of my wife's infidelity in high-definition video. But who? And why? The answer came that evening when I got home from work. Marla Jourdain was sitting at my kitchen table with Nora, both of them looking like they'd been crying. "Ethan," Marla said when I walked in, "we need to talk." "Do we?" "Someone's been following Nora, taking pictures, recording videos. They sent copies to Dr. Patterson, to me, to half the people in town." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "That's terrible. Any idea who would do such a thing?" "Don't play dumb," Nora said. Her voice was shaky and her eyes were red. "We know it was you." "Do you? That's interesting because I've been at work all day. Plenty of witnesses." "You hired someone," Marla said. "A private investigator or something." "Did I? That seems like an expensive way to find out something the whole town already knows." Nora flinched like I'd slapped her. "Ethan, please. We need to figure out how to handle this." "Handle what? The fact that you've been cheating on me for months? Or the fact that you got caught?" "I never meant for it to happen," she said, and started crying again. It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen, Nora. You made choices. You chose to lie to me every day for months. You chose to sneak around behind my back. You chose to throw away 23 years of marriage for some guy with nice abs and a social media addiction." "It's not like that," she said. "Brett and we have a connection. Something real." "Something real? You mean like the connection we had when we got married? When we bought this house? When we raised our daughter together?" Marla stood up and put her hand on Nora's shoulder. "Ethan, I know you're hurt, but making this public isn't going to help anybody." "Making it public? I didn't make anything public. Someone else did that. Maybe someone who got tired of watching you two make fools of yourselves." "What do you want?" Nora asked. "Money? The house? What do you want to make this go away?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and realized I didn't recognize the person sitting at my kitchen table. This wasn't the woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and support my dreams and make me feel like I was worth something. This was a stranger who'd been living in my house and eating my food and sharing my bed while planning to destroy everything we'd built together. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "What?" "I want you to pack your things and get out of my house. Tonight." "Ethan, you can't just throw me out. This is my house too." "Actually, it's not. The deed is in my name because my credit was better when we bought it. Legally, you're just a tenant, and I'm evicting you." Marla started to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. "And Marla, I know you've been helping her, covering for her, providing alibis, probably even arranging meeting places. That makes you complicit in this whole thing. So whatever advice you're about to give, keep it to yourself." Marla's face went white, then red. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Should I tell Nora about the little side business you've been running out of Dr. Patterson's office, selling prescription pain meds to your boyfriend's friends? Because that video I got today wasn't the only interesting thing in my email. The room went silent. Marla stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. That's right, I continued. Someone's been watching all of you, and they've got evidence of more than just the affair. It was a bluff, but a good one. I'd noticed Marla's boyfriend hanging around the dental office parking lot a few times, and he looked like the type who might be involved in questionable activities. I'd also heard rumors about prescription drug theft at medical offices around town. You're lying, Marla said, but her voice shook. Am I? Want to bet your career on it? Nora looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. What is he talking about, Marla? Nothing. He's just trying to deflect attention from what he's been doing. What I've been doing is working 40 hours a week to pay for this house and put food on the table while my wife screws around with a guy who probably can't spell mortgage. What you've been doing is helping her destroy our marriage while running your own little criminal enterprise on the side. I walked to the front door and opened it. Both of you need to leave. Now. Ethan, please, Nora said. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, figure out how to fix things. There's nothing to fix. You broke it. You broke us, and now you get to live with the consequences. They left 20 minutes later, Nora with a suitcase full of clothes, and Marla with a face like she'd been punched in the stomach. I watched them drive away, then went inside and poured myself a very large whiskey. My phone rang around midnight. It was Tommy. Jesus Christ, Ethan, what the hell happened today? What do you mean? The whole town's talking about some video of Nora and that trainer guy. People are saying you hired a private investigator to follow them around. People say a lot of things. Did you? No, Tommy. I didn't hire anybody to follow my wife. I didn't need to. She wasn't exactly being subtle about it. Then who took the video? I have no idea. But whoever it was, they did me a favor. Ethan, listen to me. You need to be careful. This thing is getting out of hand. People are taking sides, and it's getting ugly. Let it get ugly. I'm done pretending everything's fine. Where's Nora now? I don't know, and I don't care. Probably at Brett's place, crying about how mean her husband is. This isn't over, you know. She'll be back with lawyers and demands and all kinds of drama. Let her come. I'm ready. But I wasn't ready for what happened next. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed and Psycho spray-painted across my garage door. Apparently, Brett had decided to escalate things. I called the police and filed a report, making sure to mention that I had security cameras that might have caught the vandalism. I didn't actually have security cameras, but Brett didn't know that. Let him spend a few days worrying about video evidence. Officer Janet Mills took my statement and photos of the damage. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been dealing with Milltown's petty crimes and domestic disputes for 20 years. Any idea who might have done this? She asked. Well, my wife's been having an affair with a guy named Brett Hollin. He's been posting on social media about how I'm supposedly harassing him. Maybe he decided to take matters into his own hands. You think your wife's boyfriend vandalized your property? I think someone who drives a yellow Camaro and posts gym selfies all day might not be the most mature person in the world. Officer Mills wrote that down. We'll look into it. In the meantime, you might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days. These domestic situations can get out of hand pretty quickly. This is my house. I'm not going anywhere. But after she left, I realized I needed backup. I called Big Mike. I need a favor, I told him. What kind of favor? The kind that involves you and a few of your boxing buddies keeping an eye on my place for a while. I'll pay you. You in some kind of trouble? My wife's boyfriend seems to think vandalism is an appropriate response to getting caught cheating. I'd like to discourage that kind of thinking. Mike was quiet for a moment. This the same wife who's been stepping out on you? That's the one. And now her boyfriend's coming after you? Looks like it. I'll be there in an hour. And Ethan? Don't pay me. Some things you do for friends. Mike showed up with two other guys from the gym, Carlos Mendez, a former Marine who worked construction, and Jimmy Walsh, a retired cop who still looked like he could bench press a car. They spent the afternoon helping me clean up the graffiti and patch my tires, then settled in to watch the house. Around 6 o'clock, Brett's yellow Camaro cruised slowly past my street. He was probably checking to see if his vandalism had the desired effect. Instead, he got a good look at 3 very large, very serious men sitting on my front porch. The car sped up and disappeared around the corner. "Friend of yours?" Carlos asked. "That's the boyfriend." "Looks like a real tough guy," Jimmy said dryly. "Bet he runs 10 miles when he sees a spider." They were right. Brett was all show and no substance. He could intimidate soccer moms and impress teenage girls, but he'd never been in a real fight in his life. The sight of actual tough guys had probably scared him back to whatever hole he was hiding in, but I underestimated how desperate he was getting. The next day, I got a call at work from Dr. Patterson's office. It wasn't Nora or Marla. It was Dr. Patterson himself. "Ethan, I think we need to talk. Can you come by the office after hours, say, around 6? "What about?" "Just, there are some things you need to know about what's been going on here." I arrived at the dental office at 6 sharp. Dr. Patterson was waiting in his private office, looking like a man who'd been carrying a heavy burden for too long. He was in his 60s, a quiet, decent guy who'd built a successful practice through hard work and treating people fairly. "Sit down, Ethan. This isn't easy to say." I sat in the chair across from his desk and waited. "I've been aware of Nora's situation for several weeks now. The affair, I mean. It was hard to miss, given how it was affecting her work performance." "Okay, but that's not why I asked you here. There's something else. Something about Marla." My stomach tightened. "What about her?" "She's been stealing from the practice. Prescription medications, petty cash, even some of the more expensive dental supplies. I've been building a case against her for months." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think she's been using Nora's affair as a distraction, encouraging it, facilitating it, making sure everyone's attention was focused on the drama instead of what she was doing." I thought about my confrontation with Marla the night before, how quickly she'd gone pale when I mentioned criminal activity. "Do you have proof?" "Enough to file charges. But here's the thing, I think Marla's been manipulating this whole situation from the beginning. She introduced Nora to Brett. She's been providing alibis and cover stories. She even suggested that Nora start working out at Brett's gym. The pieces started falling into place. You think she orchestrated the affair?" "I think she needed a distraction while she robbed me blind. And your marriage was collateral damage." I sat there for a long moment, processing this information. "What do you want me to do about it?" "Nothing. I just thought you should know that Nora might be as much a victim here as you are. Marla's very good at manipulation. She's been playing all of us." "That doesn't excuse what Nora did." "No, it doesn't. But it might explain it." I thanked Dr. Patterson and left his office with my head spinning. If he was right, then Marla had been pulling strings from the beginning, using my wife's midlife crisis and Brett's ego to cover her own crimes. But knowing that didn't change anything. Nora had still chosen to cheat. She'd still lied to me for months. She'd still thrown away our marriage for a guy she barely knew. I drove home and found Jimmy Walsh still on my front porch, reading a paperback thriller and drinking coffee from a thermos. "Quiet evening?" I asked. "Your boyfriend came by again around 4. Drove past real slow, like he was planning something. But he saw me sitting here and kept going." "He's not my boyfriend." Jimmy grinned. "Just checking to see if you were paying attention." I went inside and made dinner, a frozen pizza and a beer, the bachelor meal I was going to have to get used to. While it was heating up, my phone rang. It was Lana, calling from college. Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom called me crying, saying you kicked her out of the house. It's complicated, honey. She says you hired someone to spy on her. Is that true? No, I didn't hire anyone to spy on your mother. Then how did those videos get out? So Lana had seen them too. Great. I don't know who took those videos, but it wasn't anyone I hired. Mom says she made a mistake, but she wants to work things out. She wants to come home. What do you want me to say, Lana? That it's okay? That I should just forgive and forget? I want you to say you'll try to save your marriage instead of just giving up. I'm not the one who gave up. Your mother did that when she decided to sleep with Brett Hollin. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Dad, I know Mom screwed up, but people make mistakes. Don't you think 23 years is worth fighting for? I thought so. Apparently your mother didn't. She's scared, Dad. She knows she messed up and now she's scared she's going to lose everything. She should be scared. Actions have consequences. What about me? What about our family? That hit me harder than I'd expected. You'll always be my daughter, Lana. That never changes. But your mother and I, we're done. Just like that? Just like that. After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and wondered if I was making a mistake. Maybe Lana was right. Maybe 23 years was worth fighting for. Maybe I should give Nora another chance. But then I remembered the video. I remembered the lies and the sneaking around, and the way she'd looked at Brett in that coffee shop photo. I remembered how she'd hummed while making coffee the morning after spending the night with him. Some things couldn't be forgiven. Some things couldn't be fixed. And I was done trying. The final confrontation came 3 days later at the Milltown High School gymnasium. The school was hosting its annual winter carnival, a community fundraiser that drew half the town. Nora was supposed to be working the dental hygiene booth, giving out free toothbrushes and fluoride information. I went because I'd promised to help with the setup, a commitment I'd made months ago, back when I still thought I had a marriage worth preserving. The gym was packed with families, kids running around with cotton candy and popcorn, local businesses showing off their services. It should have been a normal, pleasant community event. Instead, it turned into a public spectacle. I was helping set up tables when I saw Nora arrive with Brett. They weren't holding hands or being obviously affectionate, but they were clearly together. Brett was wearing his gym's promotional t-shirt and carrying a stack of flyers advertising personal training services. The whispers started immediately. People pointing and staring and whispering behind their hands. This was the first time most of the town had seen them together in public, and everyone wanted to get a good look at the drama. I ignored them and kept working. But Brett apparently couldn't resist making a statement. He walked over to where I was arranging chairs and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Ethan, right? I'm Brett. I think we should talk." I looked up at him. Up close, he was even more ridiculous than his photos suggested. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect muscles, and absolutely nothing behind his eyes. About what? About the harassment, the vandalism, the threats. What threats? Don't play dumb. You've been stalking me and Nora for weeks, vandalizing my car, spreading lies about me online, hiring people to follow us around. A crowd was gathering. I could see people pulling out their phones to record whatever was about to happen. I haven't threatened anybody, I said calmly. I haven't stalked anybody, and I definitely haven't hired anybody to follow you around. Then explain the videos. I can't explain the videos. Someone else took them. Someone else sent them out. Maybe someone who got tired of watching you make a fool of yourself. Brett's face flushed red. You're lying. Am I? Prove it. I don't have to prove anything. Everyone knows what you've been doing. Everyone knows what you've been doing too. Sleeping with a married woman, posting about it on social media, acting like you're some kind of victim because you got caught. At least I'm not some pathetic loser who can't accept that his wife doesn't love him anymore. The crowd went silent. Even the kids stopped running around. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the public confrontation between the cheated-on husband and the home wrecker. I stood up slowly and looked Brett right in the eye. "You're right about one thing. My wife doesn't love me anymore. But she doesn't love you either. You're just convenient, a distraction from her boring life with her boring husband." "That's not true, isn't it? How long do you think this is going to last, Brett? How long before she gets bored with you too? You're what, 38? 39? Still living like you're 25, posting shirtless selfies and trying to impress teenagers at the gym? What happens when the next young trainer shows up? What happens when you start losing your hair and your abs turn to flab?" Brett's hands clenched into fists. "Shut up. She's using you, Brett, just like she used me. The only difference is I was stupid enough to marry her first." "I said shut up!" He swung at me, a wild, clumsy punch that I saw coming from a mile away. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him forward, then stuck out my foot and watched him trip over a folding chair and crash into a table full of baked goods. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Brett scrambled to his feet, covered in chocolate chip cookies and red-faced with humiliation. "You snake!" He came at me again, but this time Jimmy Walsh appeared out of nowhere and grabbed him by the arm. "That's enough, pretty boy. Time to go. Get your hands off me. Walk away, or I'll carry you out. Your choice." Brett looked around at the crowd of people laughing at him, at the cell phone cameras recording his humiliation, at Nora standing frozen by the dental hygiene booth with her mouth hanging open. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is," I replied. "It's been over since the day you decided to sleep with my wife. You just didn't know it yet." Jimmy escorted Brett out of the gym while the crowd slowly dispersed, everyone talking excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. I walked over to where Nora was standing. "Happy now?" she asked. Her voice was quiet and bitter. "Not particularly, but I'm done." "Done with what?" "Done with you. Done with this marriage. Done with pretending any of this can be fixed." "Ethan, please, we can still work this out." "No, we can't. And you know what? I don't want to anymore. I'm tired of being married to someone who doesn't respect me. I'm tired of living with someone who lies to my face every day. I'm tired of being the last to know what's happening in my own life. I never meant for it to happen this way, but it did happen this way, and now we both have to live with it." I walked away and left her standing there in the middle of the gym, surrounded by the wreckage of our marriage and the whispers of a town that would be talking about this night for years. Outside, Jimmy was waiting by my truck. "Feel better?" he asked. "Actually, yeah, I do." "Good, because that pretty boy's going to be trouble for a while. He doesn't strike me as the type who handles humiliation well. Let him try something. I'm not afraid of Brett Hollin." "I know you're not, but be careful anyway. Desperate people do stupid things." I drove home to my empty house and sat on my front porch, looking out at the quiet street where I'd lived for 20 years. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and paperwork and the long, ugly process of dividing up a life. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Well played. You're stronger than I thought. A friend." I stared at the message for a long time, wondering again who had been watching and recording and manipulating events from the shadows. But in the end, it didn't matter. Whoever they were, they'd given me the truth. And the truth had set me free. I deleted the message and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new battles to fight. But tonight, I was done being the victim in someone else's story. Tonight, I was writing my own ending.